Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction, tech, or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from summer in Auckland.
And I'm Zack Semke, coming to you from dark and dreary Seattle, Washington.
Which does come up. You did mention that during the interview today.
It is, it's top of mind. Let me just say that. Today the alarm went off at 7 a.m. and it felt like it was 3 a.m. It was like, how is it possibly 7 a.m. right now? It is so dark. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit grim. And just wet, and
it's just wet. It's okay.
Which is wet here as well. I mean, we just had this massive. We had a bit with tail end of a tropical storm that came down, and loads of my garage has been flooded multiple times because the ground is just completely saturated.
Oh man!
I heard just yesterday that we had another record above average temperature for the year of 2022.
Yes.
And it was a significant increase in average temperature from the previous year, but it was also the wettest year, which is not an ideal combination when you have increasing temperatures and increasing dampness as well. But that's the new reality for the moment.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, California, of course, is getting pummeled right now by a bunch of atmospheric rivers. So we've pretty much been unscathed with that. I mean, it's this, that's the conundrum, right? It's not enough water and then way too much water.
And our friends in Europe are having ridiculously high temperatures and no snow.
Yeah. Something is happening.
Something is happening. Yes. Well, we've got a great interview today, and someone who's passionate about making buildings better, which is definitely hopefully going to help people deal with increasing temperatures, but also help reduce that impact. Jose has been on the show before, as you mentioned. I caught up with him. When was it? Back in episode
41, I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And I think I reached out to Jose. He came across the radar because of the work he was doing in Central America, and I have been interested for a while in people doing passive house in warmer climates, and that's certainly very warm, very tropical in that Central American region, very close to the equator. So he's doing some fascinating work, and you touch on some really interesting topics in that conversation. But before we get into that, let's have a shout out to our sponsors.
Indeed, yeah. So everything we do at the Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast, comes thanks to our sponsors. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors: 475 High Performance Building Supply, Bax to Ingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks too to our champion sponsors: Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Awesome. Hey, I just had a quick jump onto the Source 2050. Have they grown since the FIAS conference? There seem to be more products on there now.
I believe so. I think they have 200 plus products now listed. And they're actually going to be, and we'll talk about events later, but they'll be doing a component spotlight on the Passive House Accelerator platform, I think a week and a half after this episode is aired, to
Awesome.
to share what's happening. I hope I got that right. If not, we'll correct it in the outro.
People should go and check it out anyway. It's Source
exactly.
2050, source2050.com.
Yep.
All right. Now I did a little bit of intro there to Jose, but do you want to give us a quick intro into your recent chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I met Jose for the first time, I think, a couple of years ago in New York at the conference of the Passive House Network, and had a chance to, get acquainted with him through an interview. But we're really excited to be working with Jose, because Jose is becoming the host, and this is something we talked about in the interview. He's becoming the host of our new 101 series, which is going to happen on the first Wednesday of every month as part of the larger Passive House Accelerator live programming that we do. And he is now based in London, and getting adjusted there, and doing work with Bright Power. So we touch on what's new for him, a little bit of updates on kind of how things are evolving in Central America around performance in buildings. So a little bit of a follow up to your conversation with him back on episode 41, and his hopes for the Passive House Accelerator Lives 101 series in 2023.
All right, so let's get into it.
Well, I'm really pleased to have Jose Sosa back on the Passive House podcast. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you, Zach. I am also very excited to be at the podcast again. It's an honor.
It's a privilege for us as well. So thank you. So Jose, you're an architect, a certified Passive House consultant. You're also consulting as senior project manager with Bright Power, based in New York City. You've got other consulting stuff going on as well. You're the incoming host of our new 101 series for Passive House Accelerator Live, which I know we're going to dive into a conversation about that. Super exciting. But right now you're in London. So how's life there?
All of the above is true. It's a pretty exciting journey that I am embarking on now, doing my own thing, collaborating with Accelerator again, and this time in a more specific manner with the 101. The move to London was also unexpected. It happened back in the summer. My girlfriend just got an offer, and we just decided, okay, maybe it's a good idea to move from New York to London. I mean, one big city to another. How hard can it be? So we've been here since the end of October, and right now just adjusting to the vibe in London, which it's very interesting. I'm excited about everything, but also trying to get adjusted. It's a different pace, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine, and I know that I always feel an affinity with London, just based on the crappy weather, because I live in Seattle, and so I imagine you're probably adjusting to some gloomy, rainy days as well.
That is definitely part of it. I mean, getting to a new city in the northern hemisphere through winter is probably not the best way to experience it for the first time. I'll say that. But I'm looking forward to spring and summer for sure. I've heard that is the best time to be in London. So I am keeping my, I'm saying positive. I'll say,
Right. Withhold judgment.
You need to experience a place properly before you can pass judgment. You can complain all you want, but for proper star reviews, Google reviews, you need to really experience the thing.
The London star review, right? Okay, cool. Well, we'll circle back in a few months to see what you think. So let's dive into a little bit more about your journey. Like, what brought you to architecture, first of all, and then to passive house design?
So what brought me to architecture was, I guess, like to every architect, either the love of drawing and sketching, or just liking to build things. And I've always liked both. The funny thing is that I actually started in civil engineering when I ended high school. So it took me around 2.5 years to really just think, okay, just this whole engineering calculation thing is not my thing. So I moved to architecture, and that's how I became an architect, just going through the design process, just liking overall looking at the building as a whole and figuring out how to make it work, figuring out how to make it, pleasing to everyone. And that's basically what happened there. And a couple of years later, when I went to study my master's degree in New York City, I got introduced to Passive House through one of the courses at the City College of New York. And it just clicked at that point in my life, I guess. I was a little bit more mature. I had worked in construction in Panama, and many of the things that were presented to me just made complete sense. And again, as everyone in Passive House probably, you start thinking, wow, why didn't I think about this? Or why hasn't this been part of my practice or line of thought when I'm looking at something that's going to be built? So it kind of came for full circle, because I went out of engineering because it was too many calculations, and then I came back to it because Passive House is a bunch of calculations, which I didn't think of at the time. But again, I think I was mature enough to really see the connection between both and how they are required to produce something that's truly, beautiful and good for the people. So that's in a nutshell how I, got into both.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so in terms of your role at Bright Power, what does that entail? And is it Passive House centric, and what kind of projects are you working on there?
So my role at Bright Power came last year. That came out of nowhere, actually. I was pretty excited when they contacted me. And I mean, I've known about Bright Power for some time because of the consulting work they do and the Passive House consulting, especially. And my role there is to be basically, it's more of a project manager role, right? But I was brought into the specific Passive House projects, at least to start expanding on that part within the company, be the resource for the other colleagues that may not have knowledge on it or are trying to get into it, working through a project. There are a couple other Passive House consultants in Bright Power. They do, some of them know FIAS, some of them know PHA. So it's well-rounded within the team. And I'm pretty excited to be one of them. My expertise within Bright Power right now would be on trying to flesh out the fenestration part of it, windows, doors, which is part of my background. And yeah, right now for me, it's also a learning experience because I'm working in bigger projects and looking at the whole consulting aspect of not just talking about one material or component, but also thinking about everything else. So putting everything in practice. And that's the most exciting thing for me right now, that I can actually be a consultant. After getting the certification, you always think, oh, I'm going to use this thing pretty quickly, probably, and I'll have to figure it out. But, it sometimes takes a couple of years, and then you're actually in the project and you're like, wow, this is way more than you kind of learned through the course. And you still have to do some more research, but it's still pretty exciting.
Yeah, totally. I think that the first time I met you was at the Passive House Networks conference. It's probably been just under 2 years ago, maybe. It was, and we sat down together in the trade show, and there's a recording of it I'll include in show notes. And I think you also did an interview with Matthew Cutler Welsh for the podcast back on episode 41 that we were just looking at. So there are a couple of cool interviews that people can dive into as well. But during that conversation that you and I had at the conference, I think you were at a little bit at that place. It's like, yeah, you were, I think, probably already involved with your work with Latin American Passive House Institute, and like doing, like organizing and helping to spread the word about Passive House, and still kind of like hungry for those projects. And so now here you are doing them. So like, what is, in terms of the connection between your background in fenestration and these big projects, how does that manifest? What issues are you exploring or grappling with on those projects with Bright Power?
You just made me reflect on a couple other things, but just to focus on that one. So the fenestration that I was working with before, windows and doors, it was more for, high-end residential projects or small-scale passive house energy efficiency projects. And they usually don't have much of a constraint on the budget, let's say. Like, they could look at bigger, better, nicer quality stuff. With these projects that I would be working on with Bright Power and that I'm working on right now with Bright Power, they have, hundreds, if not 500, 600 windows. So usually the context and the quality and the budget are going to be a little bit more constrained to what it's been, let's say, specified since the beginning, especially when you're not coming in from the beginning to the project as a consultant. And then you come and say, oh, well, you need to have this level of thermal performance, or you need to, have this solar heating coefficient, etc. So that's the one thing I'm looking forward to. I want to see what the relationship is in terms of, cost versus performance, material versus performance as well, because, there's different types of materials for frames. And, the good old battle between either we use American-made products or we have to bring stuff from Europe. So that is one thing that is definitely a case study, and that I am looking forward to understand a little bit better, because I don't have a lot of experience with that construction type, which is a multifamily high rises.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, that's one of the challenges for me, and also one of the pieces that I'm looking to understand, and see how I can bring that to everyone else that I talk to in terms of construction and just overall budgeting.
So can you tell us about the Latin American Passive House Institute? I mean, you helped get that off the ground, as I understand, right?
So I was part of the beginning of the Institute in Latin America. Initially, it was Marcelo Guanchuñir from Chile, Juan Pablo from Argentina, Pedro from Argentina as well, and Michel Wassouf from Barcelona. So they got together and they started the Institute as a nonprofit trying to bring Passive House to Latin America. And the way they did it is they set everything up, and then they reached out to all of the certified Passive House consultants that they could find in the PHA database. So we were like 10 people, 10 or 11. At that time, and this was back in 2020, so it was at the beginning of the pandemic. Juan Manuel reached out to us, and there were calls and read groups and stuff. People mainly from Chile, Argentina, myself from Panama, one from Colombia, Uruguay. So it was kind of like that, just like discussions, conversations, and what's happening with each one in their countries. And we were all the same, like, well, there's nothing happening. So we've all just somehow gotten into Passive House through traveling somewhere or just some other way, but not in our specific country. So that's how I got involved, and that's how I started to collaborate more with them. And the funny thing is that eventually, after like a year or so of talking to different professionals and different manufacturers and other people within the Passive House network, we managed to do an actual conference that happened back in May 2021, if I recall correctly. And it was actually pretty good, because we were able to bring different people from different parts of Latin America to present, and also people from Spain to present. We had the Passive House network. We had Ken there as well discussing. We had Chris Ballard from Passive House Canada. So, there was a good amount of synergy and networking that was created through that conference. And since then, we've been able to help I think, more than 80, 90 people to actually get certified as a Passive House consultant in Latin America, across South America, and a couple in Central America. And I know that, since then I've been kind of a little bit more working with New York Passive House in New York. And now with the move and everything, I've been a little bit out of touch specifically with the team. But I do know that we managed, at least the Latin American Passive House Institute, managed to get a couple projects certified. So 2 in Argentina, there's another one in Uruguay that I don't remember if it's been certified or not, by Martin Comas. And his project is pretty interesting because he was using hay bales as the actual insulation and structure for the house. So, pretty cool project. And the 2 in Argentina are with Paolo Masachesi and Pedro Reina. So those are 2 high-end homes, I think. They're not like social housing, but, 2 certified projects.
Sure.
So, and there's another one in Colombia with Jairo Posada. And he's doing his, a small, a single family home, and trying to get it to get certified. I need to check with him and see how he's doing, but he was pretty far along. So there are things happening in Latin America. There are people, colleagues of mine, that are getting connected with manufacturers in Europe, and also connection with people that can provide the certification courses in Spanish. So it's been a very positive growth since we started, or since I was part of the initial cohort of the Latin American Institute.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you mentioned some connection with practitioners or maybe educators in Spain. I know, Spain seems, we have this, unfortunately, to date, we have obviously kind of an English bent, and as sort of just by default, this bias for English speaking content on the accelerator, which makes us kind of less aware of the amazing things that are happening elsewhere in the world, including in Spain. I know, and Mary James, in particular, on the accelerator team, is really keen to showcase more of that work, because you talk to some of these firms who are doing just dozens and dozens of major multifamily buildings to Passive House in Spain. It's really encouraging and also cool to see in a temperate, in a Mediterranean climate as well. So it's interesting to think. I imagine that could be a resource. When we first talked, I think I remember you saying that in Panama, for example, like in Panama City, the first examples, or some of the first examples of kind of conventional green building were corporate headquarters and stuff, or corporate offices that would bring lead design. Do you see, I think that's, more recently there has been a little bit more of a focus on building decarbonization. Has that, you've been in New York and London, so maybe, I don't know, but I'm curious if that's starting to change in terms of, are those same corporate players starting to demonstrate, or starting to show, or have interest in true building decarbonization in their buildings?
Right. And I guess I have at this point a little bit of a context and answer for it. So I went back last year, and I've been discussing Passive House and stuff with a couple of my colleagues and trying to figure out how to present all this stuff down there. And through those conversations, I've learned that there's a small group of people that are actually trying to push for better building practices, within the private sector. So private sector players, they've since moved from lead and start using edge. So at least there is more of a turn into calculation and performance-based design, so to speak. Because when you do edge, I believe you do some calculations And that gives at least a good benchmark to kind of follow what materials to use and how to address certain things. So I was pleased to hear that. And the younger generations are starting to look more into what's happening outside, but not just for architectural design, but, performance. So I think there is a path forward for standards like Passive House or Living Building Challenge, the ones that are looking more into, design and performance at the same time, and more in design and performance that can be, let's say, quantitative, that can be actually, measured, which I think is really good. And, this year, that's one of the things that I will try to do more, which is put more effort into, networking down in Panama, talk to the players in the private sector, talk to the people at the, we call them promotoras, which is the developer, the guys that are actually doing the bigger buildings, are actually trying to bring all this development to underserved areas, or just in plots of land, etc. And there seems to be the need for it, because one of the people that I was speaking with, my friend Annie Toledano, she's the second certified Passive House person in Panama, after I push her a little bit.
Nice.
And she's working with a company that's called Burn, Empresas Burn, and they are looking for a project in a very nice area of one of the provinces called Boquete. And they're looking for a certification for this building. And I pitched Passive House. Well, she pitched Passive House. So we're discussing with them, see if there's a possibility of doing this. But because of these companies looking into certifying a project with something, it tells me that, there is still that push for better construction and trying to bring more, I guess, of the money. Because when we spoke a couple of years ago, it was more about, okay, so the big multinationals are just bringing it from the outside. But since that has waned, now it seems like the players that were or are in Panama are actually trying to build to these better standards, so that they can obviously bring the level of their product higher, so they can obviously get more money. But also because it seems to be that people within Panama are trying to look more into these things, or seems to be, based on what I've learned, that there is that market right now kind of starting. Like now they have insulated panels for the roofs, which 8-9 years ago when I left, it was not something that you would think about for like a project, but now it's being used more often for that kind of stuff. So I guess the time is right to push all of this and to try to get that ball rolling with a little bit more energy, at least by people like me that have been out and are trying to come back, or trying to bring these things back and trying to cement it within the country.
Right. Well, thank you. That's a really interesting update to hear how that's evolved there. And also you're touching on something that I'm super excited about, which is this role that you play in helping to bring people along and introduce people to Passive House and encourage them to become consultants and proselytize about Passive House in a country, all those things, which leads us to the 101 series, and why we're so excited to have you as host of this new series. So for listeners, we've been doing a Passive House Accelerator live Wednesday show for years. It started as the happy hour on, I think, the second week of lockdown in COVID back in 2020, and it's evolved in different ways. So now for 2023, we have 4 series that run on the 4 weeks of the month. Of every month as to make up Passive House Accelerator Live. The first series is on the first Wednesday of every month, we'll have the 101 series. And then the second Wednesday of the month, we'll have the next Gen series, which is the next generation of Passive House and how that generation is shaping the future of building. The third will be Project Showcase, and the fourth Wednesday of the month will be Construction Tech. So that's the this long-winded kind of introduction for folks who are listening. The very first 101 series will be on February 1st. So it's coming right around the corner, and it's called 10 Steps to Designing Your First Passive House, Tips and Tricks from an Architect. And that will be presented by Michael Ingui, the founder of Passive House Accelerator and principal at Baxter Ingui Architects. So we hope that you'll join us. It's going to be, we're also moving the time. It used to be at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now it's going to be at noon Eastern. So that's 9 a.m. Pacific. And in London, what is that, 5 o'clock?
Yeah, that'd be
your
5.
Time?
Yeah, 5
6
p.m.
o'clock, 5 o'clock. Yeah. So we're happy that this new time actually allows you to be a host. So anyway, I'm super excited about this. I hope that everybody who's listening will join us on that first Wednesday of February. So I just wanted to check in with you and say, why did you say yes when we asked you? What are your hopes for the series in the coming year?
Yeah, I mean, why say no? I mean, it's one of those opportunities that you have to take. I mean, the accelerator is doing work that it's needed. I mean, once you have such a huge institute and such a huge standard working on and just very specific scientific stuff, the thought to marketing, the thought to going out of the bubble, it's sometimes difficult to see. So, the accelerator is doing that job, which I think is doing great. And I am definitely excited to collaborate with anyone that is working in passive house or trying to bring sustainable construction out into the world. And I guess I kind of cemented this when I was doing while I am doing the board at New York Passive Houses. I'm kind of like the odd man out in terms of I know construction, I know building science, but I am more about, okay, we should also think about everyone that is not in our same wavelength and see how we can talk to them and try to bring them in, or try to at least make them aware of why it's important to know these things, even if it's, the building owner or the person that lives in the apartment. Like, you need to learn about this stuff, because what I learned is that this is all very common sense. Once you listen to what Passive House does and you get into a little bit of the science, you're like, oh, this is like common sense. Like, of course I know now this is why this gets, I get all condensation in the windows, or, oh, so that is why I have condensation on the base of my floor. That's because it's, condensation of different temperatures. It's hot outside, it's cold inside, that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I just think we have enough people that are very technically savvy. They know a lot about all the theory. I want to try to be the one that's thinking about the other piece of it, which is this, like getting everyone to get excited and to actually want to learn about it. So yeah, I mean, that's why I said yes, because the 101 is going to be a good opportunity for everyone to learn about Passive House in a more, piecemeal way, and not just like going for a week and a half long course on building science, 8 hours every day, and then have a test. I think this is a really nice way to do it. And also because I want to learn more. So I am sure I'm going to be learning some of the things that I may not have thought about or I haven't encountered yet in my practice. So, it's always good to be part of it. And, you guys asked, so, I'm not going to say no to good people and good colleagues. Yeah.
Aw. Well, thank you for saying yes. And yeah, well said. What we are getting clear at in the accelerator is, in addition to being a platform where existing practitioners can come together and share lessons learned and pitfalls to avoid, and that, which is really, really important and has been a privilege to be part of. We also are really motivated to help exponentially grow the number of practitioners and projects that are happening. And so this 101 series is a key way to do that. And so it's both for seasoned professionals and practitioners, but also for new folks who want to create zero carbon buildings and are looking for ways to do it, and to be introduced to Passive House as one of the pathways, a very powerful tool to help create to help decarbonize building. And so I'm just really excited about the collaboration with you that's coming in these coming months. So
yeah, I mean, I am excited to do the 101, and I am excited for these new roles that I'm embarking on. And I am excited to, do more work with more people across the world if I can. I mean, I've been in New York, London now. Well, God knows where I'm going to end up in the next year, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful for the journey that I've taken since starting to work in Passive House. I mean, I've met a lot of very interesting people, a lot of nice colleagues, very, very smart people for sure. And I think I've stepped up my game if I had not left, and just like be open to new ideas, which is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Just trying something new, learning something new. It's always good. So, if you don't know what Passive House, you're interested, for sure, it's good to come to the Accelerator and the 101 series to get acquainted.
excellent. Well, Jose, thank you so much. And everybody join us on February 1st.
Thank you, Zach.
And that was Jose Sosa, currently of Bright Power, and currently, when you spoke to him, he was in London, but he's sort of a man of the world. He travels around a fair bit.
He is, yeah, right. He was based in New York, and now is making that adjustment to dark and dreary London.
Yeah, that was cool. It was cool hearing from him after a time. It's great always hearing of people early in the journey and getting started, and then catching up with them again a couple of years to see where they're at. And he's done some great things, and it's great to see good things coming to Jose, and still obviously very motivated to do what he is doing, and using Passive House as a basis for doing that. I can relate to his initial interest in engineering and then going away from that,
right,
because of not wanting to do calculations, but then finding himself back in spreadsheets doing Passive House. But I get the sense that it doesn't seem as much of a burden as when you're really interested in doing those calculations, and you're doing them, and you can see the reason for doing them, and they make a lot of sense as well. And yeah, they can be hard, and learning Passive House it can be quite a steep learning curve. But when you're passionate about why you're doing it, it doesn't seem as arduous.
Right. It's like the maths mafia saying, I tried to get out, but they pulled me back in. Here you are. Yeah, but it is a really clear, right, a real clear motivation and the connection. I think that's a common theme, right, that we hear about how the kind of holistic kind of understanding of building performance that Passive House brings kind of helps things kind of click into place for folks, and make connections that maybe were not obvious, in earlier days in one's path. Yeah.
And he's also, I mean, he was involved in education and kind of wanting to spread the word about Passive House from way back. And that was a big motivation for setting up it was Panama Passive House, sort of Latin America Passive House Institute. Mm-hmm. So it sort of encompassed a number of places in that region, and that's not an easy thing to get something going from scratch, and just from a handful of people, and get a bit of momentum. I think he had a bit of support there from IFA as well, which is great. But education also plays a big part in that, and it has in Jose's journey, and now also his new role at the 101 series.
Indeed, yeah. The first episode of that is coming right around the corner, so we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's very cool. interesting mention about those other rating tools, and particularly around Panama. And he mentions a recent trip back there, and larger organizations looking at doing sustainability for their buildings often start with something like LEED, but I'm hearing more and more about WELL, which, for those that haven't delved into it, does focus a little bit more on human health and the well-being of the occupants of the building, and then there's it incorporates other things about how you manage and provide good food and just well-being in general in the workplace. But it's interesting that increasing awareness of that aspect of sustainability, but also EDGE, which I've come across a little bit. I'm not sure if you've had much to do with that, Zack.
No, same. I feel like I've come across it a little bit, but it was, I hadn't heard about it for a while. So
yeah. It's one to watch. They've got a pretty slick platform, and there's some good stuff in there. It reminded me, actually, I had a catch up with someone just over New Year's that I was involved in IT, and I said, Happy New Year, and how things are going, and we sort of said that we think 2023. Well, I think that 2023 is going to be about carbon and AI. And he agreed on the AI side because he's sort of from that IT world, but I really see people getting more and more involved in both embodied carbon and operational carbon as well. And Passive House can be very helpful in doing that, certainly from an operational carbon point of view. But then now there's more and more awareness of people thinking about what they're putting into the building, which is, plays a big or has a big impact on the embodied carbon of that building as well.
Yeah, I have a colleague who was at the the International Living Future Institute for quite a while, and now is actually involved in decarbonization of buildings at Amazon. But when he was running the ILFI's new zero carbon certification, and was talking about how one of the big drivers of uptake for that certification were corporations that were really taking a close look at the carbon impact of their building portfolios. And I know that's that whole carbon accounting is something that's been top of mind for you lately. And so I was definitely thinking about that a little bit in terms of potential drivers of change in buildings in Panama, for example, with these, like, what role do the corporations play? It sounded like Jose, which is great to hear, it sounds like kind of the locus of control or of action around buildings is evolving. So it's not just the internet, it's not the internet necessarily these multinationals who are driving it, but there's some locally grown leadership around that, which is definitely great. Definitely.
One thing we did that you didn't actually talk to Jose a lot about during the interview was Bright Power, which I think is a really interesting company or organization worth checking out, because their main thing is, it's in their name, is power. So they're sort of energy, but also water company. But really interesting to see that bringing people like Jose on board to use Passive House in order to be more efficient. So definitely not, I would think, a typical company in that sector, but very interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, well, and there's now we have a lot of Bright Power connections, because Carmel Pratt, who is the co-host with Zoe Kaufman of our Next Gen series for Passive House Accelerator Live, is also at Bright Power. And Jose works with Carmel a good deal there. And, we've had I'll include links to the different ways that Bright Power has been contributing thought leadership with the Passive House Accelerator. But it's a really exciting organization and full of a bunch of dynamic, smart folks.
Yeah. And working with some potentially big buildings. I mean, Jose, one of the things he did mention was jobs where I can't remember what the exact number was, but it was in the hundreds of windows for one building. And he makes a really good point. And I've come across this as well, when you tend to think at household scale where it's justifiable to spend a little bit more on a particular window because it's a couple of, less than $100 on an individual window. But if you multiply that across a large development, those numbers get really, really big. Now that goes both ways, because if you are just concerned with cost, and if you're talking to a quantity surveyor, they're going to be paring things back by the cent, because they're multiplying those costs across that whole development, whether it's a single building or if it's a larger development of multiple buildings. So every cent literally does matter because it becomes a very large number. But the flip side to that is in the savings, that if you can convince people to invest that more upfront, then the benefits downstream are also going to be significant to the same relative level. So it's definitely there's a huge potential there to have a big impact when you're talking about either large buildings or large developments. And it's really encouraging that we have people like Jose working with organizations like Bright Power who are now working on big projects.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too how the conversation and the kind of the relationship between the project team and window manufacturers can also change when we're looking at really big buildings. So we just had a really cool presentation about Rubin Hall. I think it was in December, which is a major retrofit of a big historic brick building in New York City as part of the NYU campus. And because it's a historic building, they need to figure out how to retrofit these windows in a way that is, is historically kind of sensitive, right? They need, so they did a bunch of research to look at what were they really truly historically, what did the windows look like, and then how to replicate that look with a high performance window. And so what they've been doing is collaborating with a window manufacturer to dial in the best solution specifically for this building. So you're not going to a window manufacturer and kind of shopping for the window lines that they have. It's like, this is a big enough job with hundreds and hundreds of windows that the manufacturer is willing to do some engineering and collaborate on design to dial in a historically appropriate looking window that's high performance and that also is cost effective. So I imagine, given his kind of nerdiness around fenestration, there were some pretty fun conversations that Jose gets to have.
Yeah. And it's a good thing to be nerdy about.
Definitely.
Those they make such a huge impact. Anyone who's done a bit of PHPP or just a bit of design will quickly realizes just how important windows play to so many aspects. The energy efficiency, but also the comfort, the health, the natural daylight, and also particularly for us in warmer climates, windows can be part of the solution, but they can be also part of the problem, particularly around overheating. So, having the right treatments on windows is just a fascinating field and worthy of someone getting more and more specialized just in that area. Good stuff. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how this program, new programming for 2023, goes. Very exciting with 101 kicking off. And do you want to just do another run through of what's coming up and what things are looking like this year?
The structure of Passive House Accelerator Live, so it's still on Wednesdays. One big change is the time change. So it used to be at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now it's at noon Eastern. which makes it 9 a.m. Pacific and some ungodly hour for
6
you.
o'clock in the morning for me
Yeah.
at the moment.
Oh,
I could get there. I could get there. That's reasonable.
Theoretically, right. It doesn't work for Australians, but I'm sorry.
No.
And again, we are working on that. So the first Wednesday of every month will feature the 101 series, and that is hosted by Jose Sosa. The second Wednesday of every month will feature the Next Gen series. So that's looking at the next generation of practitioners and how they're shaping the future of building. And that is co-hosted by Carmel Pratt of Bright Power and Zoe Kaufman of NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Every third Wednesday of the month, we will have a project showcase edition of the show, and that's hosted by Beverly Craig of Mass CEC. And every fourth Wednesday of the month, we'll have Construction Tech, and that is hosted by Mark Willey, Kevin Brennan, Sean St. Amour, and Shannon Pendleton. And so it's this breadth of programming for the very experienced practitioner to people who are just brand new to Passive House, folks who are looking to contribute to the decarbonization of buildings and making buildings more resilient and healthy, and are looking for tools to make that happen. So we're really excited about it. And the Next Gen series kicked off yesterday as we're taping this, and was fantastic. We had a presentation by Zoe and Carmel. So lots of good stuff to look forward to, I think, this year. So maybe I just segue straight into what's happening this week and in coming weeks. First of all, just a reminder that registration is open for the International Passive House Conference that's taking place in March in Wiesbaden, Germany. And a number of us will be there in Wiesbaden. We'd love to see you there. And the details about the program just went live yesterday. So we'll include a link to the International Passive House Conference website in show notes.
Awesome.
This week, on January 18th, we have our first project showcase edition of the year. We're going to be joined by Sebastian Moreno Vaca, who is a founder and principal of A2M Architecture, which is this incredible firm based in Belgium. And he is going to be talking about, in a finite world, why stop at Passive House? So he's going to be showing examples of really, kind of mind-bending Passive House retrofits, and how they go much beyond Passive House in terms of their approach to decarbonization. Sebastian's a very inspiring, gifted designer and communicator. So don't miss this one. It's going to be really, really strong. In the intro, I misspoke about the date for the Component Spotlight with Source 2050. It's this week on January 19th. So the Thursday, that will be at 1 p.m. Eastern, so 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll be joined by John Knapp and Shannon Pendleton. She's the Construction Tech co-host. She's also now working with Source 2050. So the two of them will be presenting about Source 2050, closing the gap between specifying and sourcing, and they'll show off the platform and answer questions about it, and update us on manufacturers who are currently on the platform, and there a lot is developing really quickly with them, so it'll be great to be able to see that. The next week, on January 25th, the first Construction Tech of 2023 will happen. Again, this is noon Eastern, and it's called The Designer's Roadmap to High Performance HVAC, and that's with Barry Price and Kramer Silkworth. And then on February 1st, we have our first 101 session, and that's going to be 10 steps to designing your first Passive House, tips and tricks from an architect. And that's presented by Michael Ingui, who's the founder of Passive House Accelerator and the principal at Baxt Ingui Architects. Shout out and thank you to Kim Davis, our program manager, for putting this together and orchestrating it all. And I think there's a lot to sink your teeth into in the coming weeks.
There is a lot there, and if you missed any of that and didn't remember all of it,
Go to the website.
Fear not. Go to the website. It's all there, and make sure you sign up to the newsletter so you get announcements on all that stuff. And of course, we joke that some of those time zones don't suit, but of course everything is recorded, so you can go back and watch those at any time. Not quite the same as being there live and being able to ask questions live. But of course, there's some amazing content there and some great little, just quite short presentations. If you want to just catch the main presentation, then they're usually well worth a look as well. So head on over to PassiveHouseAccelerator.com, and there's tons and tons of content there to get your teeth into. Yeah,
that's a good point. We've seen a doubling of the hours watched of our Zoom calls, the recordings of them on our YouTube channel and our website, 2022 compared to 2021. So we're definitely seeing a lot of folks take in these presentations asynchronously, as they say.
Maybe it's all that dark and gloomy weather you're having, people just sitting inside watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, just
looking at nice houses.
Yeah, drinking coffee and watching YouTube.
Yeah, it sounds like the last 2 years.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. All right. Hey, well, thank you, Zack.
Thank you.
We've got some more great stuff coming up. So thank you for our audience. Thanks for listening in. And do check out all the great content on the website, all those other great resources over there, and spread the word as well, because we're always on the lookout for increasing our audience and getting the word out there. So thank you very much. Until next week, we'll see you back again on the Passive House podcast.